Welcome to the Vantage HR Influencers Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Vantage Circle, the simple and AI-powered rewards and recognition platform for employee engagement.
There aren't many companies left that don't believe that employee appreciation may help them to achieve their goals. However, realizing this fact is only half the battle because many businesses understand and implement employee appreciation programs in the hopes of achieving the desired results, but only to fail miserably. What is the possible reason behind that? I personally believe that those companies are still holding to outdated ideas about the best ways to recognize, engage, and motivate their people. Hi everyone, I'm Sushmita, your host, and in this conversation of the Vantage HR Influencers Podcast, Employee Appreciation Month's special series, second episode, we are debunking the myths related to employee appreciation. Please join me to welcome my guest today, Christopher Littlefield, an international and TEDx speaker specializing in employee appreciation, recognition, and workplace culture, and the founder of Beyond Thank You. Hi, Christopher.
Hi, Susmita. How are you today?
I'm fine. How are you, Christopher? Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on today. I'm honored to be here.
Would you like to start by describing your background and your professional journey before we start with the topic today?
Sure. So right now, what I do is I work with organizations to help them build cultures where people feel valued and appreciated. But before working in kind of corporate training and leadership development, all of that, my background was actually in international conflict resolution. So I started the first part of my career working, designing and facilitating dialogues from people around protracted international conflicts, whether it was Israel, Palestine, Northern Ireland, did one program with folks from India and Pakistan, and a lot of work in Armenia and Azerbaijan. And so when I was doing those programs, we were designing and creating spaces where people could have open dialogue about some of the challenges between their countries and the dynamics and learning to better understand each other. And then when I was running one of those programs, I actually had a huge falling out with my two conflict resolution partners. And the two of us, one was from Armenia, one was from Azerbaijan, and we were running a program. And by the end of our program, we could barely be in the room together. And, it was a challenge because here we are, we're conflict resolution specialists, and we can't resolve our own conflict. And so after a year of tension and frustration, because we had all this funding to keep on running these programs together, when nothing else worked, it's funny, but it was a 15-minute recognition activity that shifted our whole relationship. And it was that one activity and the power of that one activity to finally see and understood who these coworkers were that really shifted my whole relationship to what I was doing. And I realized that employee recognition is actually conflict prevention, right? It's that building and maintaining those relationships. So after that, I became obsessed with understanding the role of recognition in the workplace.
Right.
I went to the street, I interviewed people, I studied, wanted to know why, if recognition was so important, why do we avoid doing it? Why do we avoid expressing the things that matter to us, to others? And so I started studying that. And then out of that came a workshop that I developed. And now I've spent the last, over a decade now, training leaders around the world in the art of recognition and engagement.
Yeah, so that's true Beyond Thank You.
Yes, exactly.
Would you like to tell us some more about it?
Yeah, so what I do in my organization is I work on first helping people update their mindset about how they think about what's important and what people really need in the workplace. Yeah. I then give them new methods that they can use to be able to connect with people and then leave them with the means, right? Is because many times we get these great insights, but then what do we do to follow up? And after I've shifted people's mindset about how they think about connecting with people, we move into giving them new methods that they can try and incorporate into their day-to-day work, and then giving them the means. And I do that through running leadership development retreats, offering keynotes, virtual workshops. And through the pandemic, I wrote a book called 75 Team Activation Mode Teams to give leaders ways of how could they continue to build and maintain these relationships, regardless where their people are, where people are working, and how they're connecting.
Perfect. So, Christopher, you have worked with more than 7,000 managers and employees from around the world. How do you see the concept of employee appreciation vary in different countries?
You know what? It's interesting. So I've run programs and run my workshops, like I said, on 6 different continents. And no matter where I go, it ends up being a very similar conversation. Is at the heart of the matter, people just want to know that we appreciate who they are, what they contribute, and most importantly, what it takes to do their job each day and what they're dealing with outside of work. So that's the commonality. There may be some slight differences in how people feel appreciated, how comfortable they're to express themselves. And, I remember prior, I was doing a workshop with Salesforce, and it was a team that was based in India. And I remember beforehand, I went and I interviewed a group of people and asked, hey, so what does recognition look like? And are people comfortable to express it? And people said, yeah, people are more comfortable to express it outwardly to others, but sometimes are less comfortable at receiving it in front of others. And that was the same thing that I heard when I was working in the Middle East. And that was the same thing that I saw when I was working in Oman or working with teams in Australia. So there may be some little differences. Like in Australia, they call it tall poppy syndrome. And I thought when they said it the first time, it was tall puppy syndrome. And I was like, why would you do it? They go, because tall poppy is in a flower. Don't grow up too high. Don't think you're better than me, because if you are, we're going to tear you down. So people in Australia oftentimes would avoid giving recognition because they don't want to have that person stand out and have other people make fun of them. So you have these little nuances and differences, but when it comes to the heart of the matter of it, is people just want to be appreciated for who they are, what they contribute, and what it takes to do their job.
Right. So organizations, it has become must for them to get creative and redefine employee appreciation strategies to adapt to the constantly evolving situations. Am I right?
Yes. And I think that this is where the fundamental, you're talking about the myths around employee appreciation. And before I can answer that question, I think we need to address the big myth. And it's the one that, is a problem that's perpetuated many times in the employee recognition and reward industry, because we don't have the right terminology to be able to use to talk about what we're doing. And so when many people think about appreciation, they collapse that with rewards and awards, where rewards and awards aren't recognition in and of themselves. They're a delivery tool for a message. And at the heart of matters, people need to know that they're appreciated, right? But how we have people feel appreciated is different. And so one of the things that we need to do if we want to address the myth is that all of these things in tool and like Vantage Circle, like all the platforms tool, they play a really critical role, and they're an important part of our employee engagement and our employee retention strategy. But we need to move away from just thinking that's all we need to do, right? Because just like if you've ever bought exercise equipment or a gym membership, owning it doesn't have you fit unless you use it. You've got to get on it. You've got to do that. And so over these last 2 years, the pandemic, everything that's going on, right, we've really seen that some organizations, right, have been trying to organize events and having happy hours and bringing people together or sending gifts to people, right, which are nice gestures, but it's a gesture. It's not understanding the whole thing. So early on in the pandemic, I wrote an article for HBR saying how to be an empathetic and remote coworker. And it was a very popular article because it was reminding people that what people need right now is not necessarily the gift. What people need right now is to understand that you understand what they're dealing with each day. What's home life like? What you're dealing with? Are you taking care of a sick parent? Do you have kids at home? Are you managing all that? And so the best way to appreciate people right now is to show that we understand and value what they're dealing with outside of work. And in order to do that, we need to take time to understand what they're dealing with by asking people. And so the best managers right now and the best leaders in organizations are constantly staying present to people have lives outside of work. And my job is to understand what they're dealing with, to know that that's changing all the time. And even though my life and work may be easy, that doesn't mean theirs are. And so the best managers right now are using what I call the 1-6 rule in my book, 75 Team Activities for Remote Teams, is remembering that every time we get together, that for every hour of meeting time, 1/6 of it or 10 minutes should be used for relationship building. And that can be just getting on and starting with a question by like saying, hey, what were you doing 5 minutes before this meeting? Because when we get on and we have these calls, we have no clue what people are coming from or what they're going to afterwards. When we ask, what were you doing 5 minutes before? People often share, I was just running from another meeting. Hey, do you need a second to go to the bathroom or get some food before we jump into our meeting, right? Or, I was just taking care of my kid who's also in virtual school right now, or I was just dropping them off. And it triggers that empathy to remember that people have lives that are going on. So the best organizations right now are able to hold those two things together. Our business results are at the same importance as our people results, which means we're taking care of our people to make sure that they have the resources they need to succeed both at work and at home.
Yeah. So, Christopher, apart from the one that you mentioned, that employers do confuse between rewards and appreciation in the workplace, are there any other common misconception or myth that you want to talk about today?
Yes. I mean, the common mistake I see is that people will give a reward, a gift card, a gift or something like that, and think that they've checked the box of expressing their appreciation. Right? Mm-hmm. That is a thing. And it's just like, and the mental shift that people need to make is this mindset shift that rewards and awards are recognition. They're not. They're a delivery tool for a message, and they play an important role. Right? But we need to shift to thinking, and when I do run my workshops, one of the things I explain is that we need to take recognition, and we have a terminology problem, and we need to decouple recognition from rewards and awards. And we need to break it down into what I would see is appreciating the person, which is the day-to-day actions and things that we do to show people we appreciate them, saying good morning, saying how's the family, checking in, seeing if there's anything that they need for support. When someone shows up, noticing when they're there, when they're not there, noticing when they're not. When somebody sends a report saying, hey, thanks for sending that, and giving feedback, checking in. Those are the day-to-day things that we do to signal to people we appreciate them. Then there's also acknowledging the circumstances and acknowledging the circumstances that we're working in. Hey, thanks for coming in when it's extremely hot outside today. Thanks for coming in when it's extremely cold. Thanks for doing your work while you have everything else going on outside of it. Hey, I know we're down 10 staff right now, and you've been picking up for a lot of other people's work. Thank you for doing that. So acknowledging those circumstances we're working in, and also acknowledging when we're a jerk at work. You know, it's like yelling at somebody, and then when nobody says anything about it afterwards, it leaves us feeling like, well, do you really care? And then there's recognizing people's effort and progress, right? Because people don't want to be recognized just for the result they produce. They want to be recognized for the ups and downs and everything they went through to produce that result. And we often don't see that. So we need to engage in understanding what people are going through and what it takes to do their work, right? And so we need to shift that. And then those rewards and awards are a small portion of it. And so when it comes to coming up with what we can do, we need to move away from this myth that reward or award is all we do. That's just the icing on the cake. That's the gift at the end. But what really matters to people is not necessarily that gift. It's the intention that went behind the gift. So if I just check the box and go, okay, you know what? I got you this, like here's one example, that one of my favorite examples. Somebody got somebody a really nice bottle of alcohol. Well, they didn't drink. So it meant absolutely nothing to the person. It was like, thanks for the gesture, but you didn't know over the last 10 years that I don't drink, right? And it's like completely missed the mark, where then there can be the smallest thing is like, hey, you know what? I got this little rock right here and this little candle right here because I know that you meditate, and this made me think of you. And so when you see this, I want you to remember the contribution because you're a rock on our team. And that right there is who you are for us. So every time you see that, I want you to think about me, our team, and all you've done to be the rock for us on our team, right? And that could be a free gift.
Yeah. So clearly every appreciation has to have some specific value to the person receiving it.
Yes, exactly. And there's two different types of recognition. When we're giving recognition and when I'm training people, I break recognition in specific act of recognizing. There's standard recognition where I'm sharing how what you did impacted me, right? You know, where, hey, thank you for preparing. Thank you for finding the bio ahead of time and doing all the work to understand who I am before we get on this podcast. I really appreciate the preparation you put into for us having this conversation today, because not everybody does that. And I really value that. Mm-hmm. Right? That's me sharing how what you did impacted me. And then there's what I call, and this is something that I created, which is called reflective recognition. And reflective recognition is based on the understanding that you and I may work together all the time, but I don't see what you're dealing with. You may produce a report for me. You may do a podcast or something like that, but I don't know all the work that comes in to that final product that you created. So I can recognize you for the result you produced, but that doesn't see everything it took for you to do that. So reflective recognition is asking people and saying, hey, you know what? I haven't seen you in a long time. What is it you're proud of? Or what is it that you want to be acknowledged or recognized for? And then asking the person to share. And then as they're sharing, digging in and asking questions to learn about what it took for them to do what they did. And then I just recognize them back for what they shared. And when we practice reflective recognition, we also learn about what matters to that other person.
So this reflective recognition, as you mentioned, is it a better choice in the work from home scenario?
Yes. I mean, and the truth is it works everywhere. I've been doing this and training people in reflective recognition, like I said, for 10 years. I've done that with oil workers, like in Oman. I've done it with, Reserve Bank of Australia employees in Australia and social workers in LA and CEOs at a conference in Florida, right? It doesn't matter who you are, because no matter where we are, whether we're in person or working remotely, we don't see what people are dealing with. And the only way we find out what they're dealing with, what it took for them to do what they did, is by asking them what they did.
Right.
Listening for what really matters to them and what's important to them.
Great. Perfect. Would you like to give some tips for the leaders listening to us today?
I mean, I think the biggest tip is to remember that the greatest leaders, so I was part of a best place to work study for the last several years in the marketing industry. And when I interviewed the CEOs of the top 10 companies, there was a commonality among all of them. And all of them adopted what I call a valued employee mindset. The mindset that my job as a leader is to make sure that my employees are both successful at work and at home. And what I mean by successful at home, that I am creating a work environment, right, that takes into account all that they're dealing with at home and at work. And I'm constantly taking efforts to make sure that they have what they need to succeed. And that doesn't mean that I'm counseling them on their divorce or their relationship, but making sure that, hey, you know what, if this person has pickups and they do this, and by the way, we're only doing this for those employees who are really doing stellar and extraordinary work, because we are support and create a valued employee experience for those employees that really add value and bring value to the team. But we want to move mountains to make sure that they have the resources to succeed at work and at home. And so one is adopting that mindset that my job is to ensure the success of my people. And in order to do that, I need to understand what they need to succeed. And so that's one, the mindset we need to adopt. And then two, that my job is to constantly be asking people, engaging people, and understanding, like I said, what they need to succeed, and showing them that I value and appreciate who they are by incorporating things into every meeting I have, into every conversation I have, and making sure that I'm taking time to get to know my people. And then in the end is, as senior leaders, that what am I doing to nurture a culture of appreciation in my organization? And that starts from the conversations we're having with our senior leaders. That takes into account the importance we're putting on nurturing a culture of appreciation. I'm working with a client right now, which keeps on saying, hey, can we cut the program from 3 hours down to an hour? Can we actually fit this? Is there a way that we can not do a program for, instead of doing 5 programs to really train people, can we just do it in 1 hour? Stop cutting down things and show that you value the importance of this, and that this is not a check the box thing that we're doing, but it's actually built into everything that we do. And
for the team members, Christopher, I mean, most of them get confused like after receiving an appreciation. So how do they accept an appreciation, like a compliment maybe from their manager or boss?
Just say thank you. And if it meant something to you, thank them back. I mean, I've done a lot of work on this, and you can check out some of my articles on HBR around giving and receiving compliments at work. Sure. It's probably one of my popular articles. But I think what it comes down to is being recognized is very vulnerable, because all of a sudden someone shows that they were paying attention and they saw something. And when our mind may go to, well, I don't deserve that, or I don't really do this, or why are they recognizing me? There's some hidden intention. In all of my research and work, there's so many different layers to being recognized. We've been trained throughout our whole life by our parents and all of that. And I can't go into that in a short podcast right now. And that's why in every program I run, the first part is learning to understand our hidden relationship to giving and receiving recognition. But at the heart of it, when it comes down to it, when someone recognizes you, just simply say thank you. And if it meant something to you, let them know. And say, hey, you know what? It was really great to hear that. Thank you for noticing. And that's all we need to do. And also to remember that even if we don't agree with the recognition many times when people are recognizing us is often more about the giver than the receiver. So give them an opportunity to contribute and share how they experience working with you. Because when they do, you'll also get insights to how other people in the world see you, which will help shift your perspective about yourself as well.
Brilliant. I loved your insights, Christopher, and I hope everything we discussed today, it was a short and crisp conversation, but I truly hope that it will be of much help to our listeners. So finally, how can our listeners reach out to you?
Wonderful. You can connect to me. Feel free to connect to me on LinkedIn. You'll find me at Christopher Littlefield on LinkedIn. You can find me on my website at beyondthankyou.com and go in there. There's lots of tools and resources you can download. There's a team relationship building assessment, and there's some other tools on there as well. And you can also find my book on Amazon, 75 Team Building Activities for Remote Teams, Simple Ways to Build Trust, Strengthen Communication, Laugh Together from Afar. And the last thing to share is that I have a newsletter that goes out every 2 weeks where I share tips, tools, and resources. It's on my site. It's called The Nudge, and you can sign up for that there.
Thank you so much for joining me, Christopher, in this special episode of our Employee Appreciation Month podcast series.
You're welcome. It was great to join you. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening to the Vantage HR Influencers Podcast. Please do subscribe to Vantage HR Influencers Podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and our YouTube channel for new episodes.